Okay, so what was going on was the vast majority of all this stuff, and what's going on was basically right through the X. It seemed like. See the X right there? It was like right, majority of it was right there, and that's where you can't see through. You know, because there's other smaller trees in between. You can't see through that stuff as opposed to over the root ball and over here on some of these angles. You can see a little bit further on this angle, but the vast majority of the stuff was coming from the area that we could not see through. This right over back over here.
All right, some things we're going to talk about, things that you don't know these are the behind the scenes information that you don't know because it wasn't filmed, but it's kind of fills you in on the background, what was going on out there. And I'm out here walking with Indy and Beato on the Polk City Trail. But anyway, some of the things that I needed to fill you in on. And also hold this camera up at the same time, film myself. But all right, so we had made it. We hiked in there, as you saw in the video clip that I released. We went in there, and then we hiked, got to our spot. It was not too far off trail, and we started setting up the campsite. So within finishing up, setting up camp, and feeling the altitude squarely, and so I noticed I felt like I had to go relieve myself. So because when you're at high altitude, that's when the body starts bleeding the water, sucking the water right out of your body, and you need to go pee all the time. But so there was this log, this whole area we were in was kind of like a big blind and entrapment type thing. So I just finish up my tent and everything. I go out there and I say, I go to myself, I go out there and I start to, pee. And so I'm looking up at the sky, and I'm just thinking in my thoughts, and because I know a viewer asked me if I just would, like project my thoughts out there, so to speak, and ask for interaction type stuff. I kind of know better than some of that. Wow, a big old critter just crossed the trail just now. Like a big old, I don't know what it was. Morning. Yeah, so a viewer asked me to do that, and so, but he was meaning more like towards, to elicit an ET alien response. But anyway, I just said, to myself, I kind of, protected my thoughts out there that, hey, we came a long ways to have an interaction. That's what we're looking for. And so I was just quietly out there by myself and just, looking up at the sky and thinking about it, hey, but I want the interaction, if it could just be a safe interaction and with a little bit of a space, a little bit of distance in between would be nice. So while I was standing there and I was done, like right by this log, I'll show you in the video. I mean, no sooner than when I was done, I heard voices, and they were at like 1 o'clock from how I was standing. And I just stood there and just had a grin on my face, and it sounded male, sounded like it was thresholdy, but I can pick up on that very quickly because I'm very accustomed to that. And so I just kind of grinned and laughed and stood there a little while longer, and just kind of smiled and looked up, looked around, went back, and had to go tell Boyd right away because Boyd was camping out right next to me, not too far, maybe 10 yards away. And so Boyd, I said, you just went back there to take a leak by that log back there, and I heard voices. And he said, okay, got that. And I realize until people start working together, they don't really kind of pick up on our strengths and weaknesses. But if anyone's been out with me long enough, they know I can pick up on voices really quick that go on around me. And so that's when I told Boyd. And literally, like within 20 or 30 minutes after tents were set up, it was like wham, wham, wham. And it was like everybody, you know, I'm saying everybody. I spoke to Chris Ronhart later. Ronhart told me, he said he didn't hear the, Ronhart said he didn't hear the 3 big knocks. Boyd heard them. Wade heard them because I was standing there looking at Wade, because Wade at the time, I think Wade at the time was over there on my backside. He was getting his parabolic out and getting it ready and that. And so we all just kind of grinned and laughed, and I was like, okay, all right, well, it looks like it's getting ready to start, man. And so yeah, that was the introduction, is how it kind of all started out there in that one location. All right, so a few minutes go by, and I think maybe we heard a couple more knocks going on, so we knew something was getting ready to start up. So Wade came on over, and he had his parabolic in his hand for sure by then, because I remember that. And I think Rob was at the time, he was already starting to do some live streaming, and some of the guys were already starting to do live streams. I didn't do anything just yet. I was getting ready to start mine. And then and I'm standing there looking at Wade, and that's when I heard like voices. Not just like thresholdy stuff. It was like voices, to the point that it sounded like sounded more like towards people, but not 100% definite. But that's kind of how it kind of leaned, and it sounded like at least 2. But they were like together. They weren't like spread out type stuff. It seemed like the voices were together. You could hear it, but it wasn't female. It sounded male. And so Boyd, I keep saying Boyd, Wade heard that also, because he gave me that look in his face, and like, did you just hear that? And I'm like, dude, did you have the parabolic on? Get it on, get it recorded. And I ran over there to him, and that's when I tried to get a live stream going on my phone, and it just literally just crapped out. And earlier, before, I was successfully able to get one out, but at that time it was just like, wow, it was like there was nothing getting out. So that's a little bit about what was happening. All right, so what happened, and how does all this react and relate to the 237 thing? All right, at 237. There's some people coming up. I'm just turn the camera off.
It's nice and cool.
That's Indy's harness that got from Norway. There's a lady over there in Norway that makes these sled dog harnesses, and that's what that is. That's a harness for sled dogs to pull. That's why it pulls from the hooks from her tail, so it's kind of like it doesn't choke her or anything like that. She can pull her whole torso. But anyway, okay, so back to where we were. Okay, so if I can get my thought process. So I don't look at things as being a kind of a coincidence anymore. I look at more things like more towards leaning of a percentile, that most of the stuff that once you start getting the odd stuff and the bizarre stuff starts happening to you, more and more of that seems to come around. And I don't look at it as like just purely coincidental. All right, so getting to the nighttime thing. All right, at nighttime, right at a 237, I feel like something, I feel I'm awakened and something has me on my left foot, and I'm like being pulled. I've literally felt like I was already like partially through my tent, not through the doorway of the tent, but through the rear of the tent, the end of the tent where my feet is at. And when I'm finally, finally coming, making sure I'm fully conscious and everything, my feet's all like up on the end of the tent. So I definitely had moved towards the end of the tent, for sure. I knew that. And so as I was fluttering around, getting around, and being ticked off, like as I felt like something had grabbed me and was yanking me away, and so I made a commotion and was hollering, Wade was already awake, and Wade yells over at me. I think he was already outside his tent, and Wade just says, Chris, he said, they've been knocking already. And I was like, holy cow. And then I was like, well, I'm getting up, and then he said something about that they had made. No, I heard the two whams. That's what it was. And then went, so as I was laying there and it was like wham, wham. And I was like, holy cow. And that's when Wade said, they've been knocking already all, through the night. And then so that's when I was like, I'm getting up. If something's pulling on me and jerking on me, or if I'm dreaming, or something's communicating with me through my dreams or whatever, or waking me up. But the point I'm going to make is that, let's just call it a dream. Let's just call it a dream. All right. It correlated with activity that was going around simultaneously, and that is what I don't consider coincidence. Other people might look at me, or other team members might look at me as being purely a dream, but the dream correlated with activity that was going on. That's the point I'm making. So I get up, and right away I had my FLIR ready. It was on the monoped, and I grabbed the FLIR, zip up, get my shoes on. I'm everything done, and so I poked the FLIR right outside the tent real fast, start filming, and didn't see a jack diddly. The FLIR was malfunctioning big time because the screen, I mean, it just wasn't even booting up. I mean, all I had was just the color stripes, and that's like, when it does that, it's like when it's at a failure state and it's got to go through a total reboot again. So as I'm waiting to get the FLIR up and running, the screen never really does finally come around. It's the screen that you see with your eye is totally still blurry, fuzzy with lines running all in it. It wasn't really clear at all. The cold was definitely affecting the equipment. But so I just pushed the filming button anyway to start recording, regardless of what I was able to see. So what I was able to look at live was totally distorted from what the film and the video will show. All right, so I make it over to Wade. We talk, and I yell at Rob's tent because Wade was over there near his tent. I was like, "Is Rob up? Is Rob up?" And so I don't know if Rob even heard anything at that time. Reinhardt was awake, and Reinhardt said, "Hey, I heard you mumbling, man. I think it was a dream." And Boyd started shining his flashlight around over there near my tent. He said, "I didn't hear anything run away. Maybe it was a dream. Had to be a dream, or more likely a dream." And so Chris was thinking dream, Boyd was thinking dream. My mind is thinking something's trying to pull me out of my tent, so I am going to get ready to deal with whatever it is. And so stayed out there with Wade for, I don't know, at least maybe 45 minutes to an hour waiting things out. But man, it was cold. And by then, you know, it was well into 3 o'clock in the morning. Nothing else seemed to be happening, so I told Wade, I was like, okay, I'm going to go lay back down. It looks like nothing else is going to happen. So I lay back down and eventually fell back asleep. So I went back today. And I went back and looked historically over my my Garmin watch here. You know, it tracks the heartbeat. So I went back and looked at it to see if it would be able to have a record of my heart rate at that time period during that morning, to see what was going on with my sleep and my sleep pattern, if it could tell me anything. Sure enough, man, my heart rate jumped right on a correlating the, you know, the episode, and you can see it. But also on the heart rate, and I'll put this out in a video on the heart rate, you will also see that my heart rate is at a lower rate going into the episode, and then after the episode you see my heart rate is at a much higher speed. In other words, my mind didn't allow my body to get back into deep sleep again, is what it looks like. Because you can clearly see heart rate down here, and then after the episode I go back to sleep, the heart rate's up higher and more consistent, more longer. So you can definitely see that my body just didn't allow me to really rest again. Catch up, girl. Catch up, girl. Alright, so hopefully I am not, in my narration of the story, hopefully I'm not bouncing all over the place, because I'm walking and looking and all at the same time. So I apologize for being all bouncy all over the place in the story. Okay, so morning time comes along, I awaken, and we know we're getting ready to start heading out to look for the lodge. So we're breaking down camp and everything. And so as I start pulling down my tent, you know, first thing you do is you rip out the tent stakes. So, and this is where it gets weird also. I go to pull out the first stake in the corner of the tent where my feet was at. That's where I started at. And I notice, where's the stake? And so I'm saying to myself, as I'm breathing heavy, I'm like, where's the stake? So I start trying to get a stick real fast and start digging around, and I don't see the stake. And so I started digging some more, still don't see the stake. Dug left and right, looked around, and then I'm like, okay, fine, I'll just get my hatchet. So I got my hatchet out and started just chopping, because I was determined not to leave a stake behind on the mountain. So as I started chopping and digging around, I started realizing that the tent looked like it had shifted some, but I couldn't find the stake. So as I jumped to the next side, and I could not find a stake. And so I jumped to the opposite side of the tent and start digging around, looking around, and there's no stake. The only stake, there was no stakes holding the tent down. I clearly, distinctly remember staking the tent down, although I don't have any memory of removing the stakes. So I said, where's my stake? So I started to dig out the, I'm coming, girl. So I started to dig out the tent bag, and I said, I know good and well I staked this tent down. I know good and well I remember doing that because of the high winds. There's no way I did not stake down this tent. So I went looking for the stakes, opened up the black bag, and inside the black bag was a stake bag, and lo and behold, there was the stakes. But the stakes had mud on them. And so I took a deep breath at that time period, thinking, okay, why would I have done something silly like that? And so it started to dawn on me that there was something bizarre seemed to have happened. I didn't tell the guys about this when I was up there, but there was mud on the stakes. and I have no memory of pulling the stakes back out and putting the stakes in the bag. The stakes didn't magically get in the bag. They were put back in there by me because they were back inside the black bag. No memory, and I thought that was crazy and weird. So when the weird stuff starts happening to you, especially when you feel like you've had memory loss, when you do dawn upon it and you come to the realization that you have no memory of something, but you're clearly looking at evidence that you did do something, oh, mosquitoes. Your brain starts trying to assimilate answers and tries to find logic to it and the whole 9 yards, and sure enough, your brain will start talking you out of the whole thing. Your brain will start talking you out of the whole thing because it wants to protect you and apply just logic and make you think that, okay, it's just a dream, nothing else happened. But you explained to me how my sticks got back inside the tent bag, inside another bag, and I had no memory of pulling them out. And up on that mountain, we were getting 25-mile-an-hour gusts and even higher than that. And there's no way I would have not staked down that tent and then turn right around and then remove the stakes. Okay, so you've been seeing some of the video footage of Indy poking around in the suitcase. So when I get home, I return. I roll the suitcase around. The dog she's all, it was late at night when I got there, so she's seeing the bag in the morning and she's like all over the bag and she's like scratching at the suitcase sitting there. And so she's scratching at it because she knows there's something inside the suitcase. All right, so I'm like, well, you know what? I'm curious. What is she scratching for? So I grab the camera and I start to film live. What you're seeing on the suitcase thing was completely live. There was nothing pre-recorded or pre-thought of or pre-anything. It was actually live. She's rooting around, and when she finally gets to the rooting point, she pulls out my sock. The socks that I had on that night, and the socks that I hiked up there with, and the socks that I slept with that night and wore. She pulls out those socks, and I have 3 pairs of socks in my suitcase, and she pulls out the socks that I had on that night. And then she grabs the sock, and then she runs off in the living room floor and puts it between her paws like she's like sniffing on it, and then we talk her out of it to get the socks. I don't want her to try to do anything with it, but I just thought that was totally freaking cool. When the dog grabs a sock that I was wearing that night. Totally awesome. Good girl.
Okay, so you're curious. What are you after? Let's see what you're after. I am finally opening. Hold on, leave it alone. I'm finally. Let's see what Indy goes after. I'm curious now. What are you after, girl? Go get it. All right, do you want this? Nope. Do you want this? What do you want? What'd she get? She got a sock. Did you see that? She got my sock. You only wanted the sock. Ain't that something?
All right, so this happened around May. This happened around first week in May. I had not seen any of the Skinwalker Ranch series at all. As a matter of fact, they started the series while we were out on the expedition, so I hadn't seen anything. So I saw one of the last episodes that they released where Travis and Eric had their episode simultaneously, and Travis was suddenly awakened, and I was like, oh boy, I know what that feels like when you're suddenly awakened, and then the weird stuff starts happening, and you start getting correlations with with Travis. He got a correlation with Eric, and then they didn't just dismiss it. They looked around that time period, which is what you have to do. You can't dismiss. You have to start applying a scientific process to it. If you got to think about why was you suddenly woken up in the middle of the night and felt like you were being grabbed and you felt like you was already partially through the tent, you know, and if you just take that and just dismiss it, you would get no other further information out of it. But what I did is I started to collect and realized that it wasn't probably just a dream. It was something probably going on, because I had asked earlier for an interaction. I think there is something to the whole thing. I think there's something, scratching as I'm walking too slow. I think there's an interaction to it that these things can't interact with your thought process. They can interact with, it seems like there's ample evidence that they can interact with your thinking process, what your thoughts are, even unspoken. That's why researchers, investigators always will come with these words and they'll say, well, it's like it knew what we were going to do before we did it, you know, or the activity seemed to know we were going to go there or do something or whatever. And you will hear this often. It's totally 100%, it is totally true. It is not a fabrication. It's not woo-woo. It's not any of that. It's not any of that stuff. If you apply a scientific, logical process to it, you will find correlations to this stuff. And so the activity seems to predict and know what you're fixing to do at times. It's nothing at all woo-woo to it at all. It is totally able to be proven if you correlate the data and make records of it and everything. So I'm going to put out that Skinwalker Ranch piece also and show you in case you haven't seen it. But that's when you see this video, that's what I'm talking about. Many people have reported this also. One of the viewers even commented on this video that I put out yesterday that even Les Stroud had a thing on TV saying he felt like something was sitting on him. And so for everybody out there, when you start getting these things that are in the thresholds of your sleep and you're out in the wilderness there, or you've got activity going on around you and things happen to you, you do not need to discard that stuff. You really need to take heed to it and apply logical reasoning to it, because it will mean things if you give it the time. So enough of my talking. Hopefully I remember to get it all out there. I'll probably get to the house and go, oh, I forgot to say something. But I just feel more comfortable when I'm in the woods. And I don't know, for some reason I just feel more comfortable in being in the woods, and I can talk my thoughts a little bit more. Maybe it's the woods that get my thought process rolling and I speak about it. Okay, so I hope you enjoy some of the breakdown that I did. Hopefully I wasn't too lengthy. And I'm working on putting out the rest of the expedition stuff, and I'll probably just throw it out there in a bigger segment, bigger piece of it. And I'm already working on the next adventure. Looks like my target area, I want to do the Sierras. So I want to say thanks to all our viewers out there, and we just keep doing our best to just keep bringing it to you the way it happens. And these things do happen for people that do it. Be careful what you do. Be careful what you ask for. Try to put boundaries in things that you do ask for. And that's it. Thank you very much.